Hello, BookTube. Happy New Year. Nice to be talking to you all again. We are starting the year of 2024, and I thought I might make a short video to look at the lay of the land, given that situation. I thought we'd just briefly look at the state of the world in the first week of January in 2024, and then, more importantly, the state of me. So we start with the world, and the world, unfortunately, the three main things that are on my mind, although certainly not on the minds of the editors of the New York Times, are the three biggest stories currently going on in the world, and the ones that have the highest likelihood of affecting 2024 and 2025. The first of those is a renewed aggression of Russia's land war to conquer a neighboring country, a neighboring democracy in Eastern Europe. Russia has redoubled its efforts to simply crush resistance in the country of Ukraine. Probably it has been spurred on to do this by Russia has a number of high-placed intelligence assets in the United States, almost all of whom are members of Congress, just fully and openly in the employ of Russian money or the victims of Russian compromise. And probably the powers that be in the Kremlin realize that support for Ukraine has never been shakier, and that Ukraine cannot possibly continue to resist Russia without U.S. military aid, without huge amounts of U.S. military aid. There are more adherents of Vladimir Putin's aggressive land war in the United States than there are opponents of it in the United States Congress. I never, in a million years of watching American diplomacy, American politics, I never in a million years thought I would say that. But the U.S. Congress is probably 70, 71, 75% in favor of a Russian dictator who is trying to crush another country just because he wants it, just because he fancies it, and who will certainly imprison and execute the leader of that country. And that's okay with Republicans in this country. It's sort of mind-boggling to say. That is a big story. I think that will get much bigger in 2024. Another story, of course, another main story in the news, although barely at all on the front page of the New York Times, is what's going on in Gaza. On October 7th of last year, Hamas terrorists conducted an attack on Israel, and it was horrific, absolutely horrific. The details are, the videos, the images are mind-staggering in their barbarity. And in response, and here I almost want to put in response in air quotes, Israel launched an all-out assault on Gaza. Northern Gaza to start with, but that won't stay true in 2024. It's a charged subject, except in the placid waters of the New York Times, which is supposed to be the paper of record in the United States. The oft-spoken justification of this launch of aggression on Israel's part was along the lines of reducible to never again. We will not have this happen again. This must be atoned for. This must be redressed. We must eliminate Hamas as a force, regardless of whether or not the people of northern Gaza voted in Hamas. We must eliminate them. They are a terrorist organization who are openly bent on our destruction. Can't have that in contiguous territory. Can't have that nestled next to your own territory. Can't have that at all. That has to be gone. Completely gone. But almost immediately, that was not even the rhetoric that the powers that be in Israel were using. And although they still use it, it seems a little tinny. This seems like a war of elimination. And certainly the images bear that out. Not only vast tracts of suburban spaces, parks, streets, libraries, universities, hospitals, just level. If you look at the drone footage that's available, it's just level. You would think you were looking at museum footage of 1945 Berlin, or worse than that. Some of it is literally level. It looks like nothing has ever been there. It looks like it's just the chaparral of Palestine. Every single inch of that bare ground represents stacked and stacked bodies, dead bodies. And that's continuing. You wouldn't know it from the news coverage, but that is continuing. And it is horrifying. Absolutely horrifying. The numbers are staggering. 1,000 people died or were injured as a result of October 7th. The body counts, by a conservative estimate, 10,000 children have been killed. And no end in sight. And judging by flutters of nervousness at the U.S. State Department, there is renewed worry that this conflict is going to ignite the region, as the diplomatic phrasing would be. That it's going to ignite the region, which would be catastrophic. Even more catastrophic than what's happening now. But what's happening now, it is a pretty clear example of a point that I have made often on this channel, which is that the 21st century has completely forgotten, or it knows and is completely rejecting, the age-old nostrum that your grandmothers taught you that two wrongs don't make a right. That's the parochial way to look at this. The cynical way to look at this whole thing would be that Israel is waiting for an excuse. This looks like land clearage. Now, it is totally morally unjustifiable. It is totally unjustifiable to conduct wholesale slaughter of innocents like this. I know it's a complicated situation, since those innocents are the mothers and brothers and sisters and cousins of Hamas. And Hamas knows that and has entwined itself with the civilian population under the explicit assumption that that will mitigate reprisals against it. That's an incredibly tough situation. Incredibly tough. But this is not in any way a proper response to that situation. This is a blatantly black letter law criminal response to that situation. So that's another story that rolls with us into 2024 and looks again like it could get much worse, especially if other Palestinian occupied territories get into the fight, or Lebanon gets into the fight in a serious way. Then the dominoes start to fall, and then we're looking at a much bigger crisis. And then the third story. I'm sorry, all these stories are depressing. There aren't any positive stories, big stories to tell going into 2024. But the other big story, in a way, I know people are dying in the streets of Ukraine, and people are innocents, women and children, hospital patients. Cesarean sections being done without anesthesia on roadsides. I know that's happening in Gaza, but in a way, the third story entering into 2024 is more dire than either one of them, which is that 2024 is the year that America is poised on the brink of fascist overthrow. America is poised on becoming a fascist country. The casus belli will be at the end of this year, so it may be quiet between now and then, unless there's an unforeseen catastrophe. If a president or a presidential candidate were to die, that could trigger things a lot earlier. But instead, the triggering point will be the so-called elections in November, I would guess. And either of the most likely outcomes of those of November in 2024 is bad, really bad. Both of those outcomes are bad. The two most likely outcomes being either that the military intervenes to protect the election, or that the military refrains from intervening to protect an election. Once either one of those things happen, we are already a fascist country. If the military determines whether or not you have... The reason that I call it more dire, those of you listening in Australia or New Guinea or the south of France might be saying, well, how can you say that that a political season in one country is more dire than war and extermination in two other countries? The reason I say that is the reason that I mention on this channel all the time. which is that if you get on your bicycle, no matter where you're listening to me, if you get on your bicycle and start pedaling, long before you get tired, you will come within range of a U.S. military installation. Some of you may have seen recent political upheavals in Africa that have put the one acknowledged U.S. military base in the area in the spotlight. Drone footage, again, showing that military base. Point that I want to make, that military base, the one that is in the latest news in Niger, is a $100 million installation. Within 50 miles of it are two $300 million installations that aren't known, that have never been, the drones have drones of their own to shoot them down. They've never been photographed. And that's true where you live too. This is not an instance of Germany in the 1930s with a fleet, 2 ships of which could barely reach China, where, yes, it could wreak havoc in Europe, but Germany was never a threat to the United States, for instance. Germany was never a threat to Russia, obviously. They were never a threat to Africa. To the south of Africa? Absolutely not. That is not true. If America slides into fascism, no one is safe, including the 2 places that I already mentioned, especially, well, it's the third subject, is the looming threat of a fascist takeover in this country, which once upon a time, even as late as mid-2023, was viewed as hyperbole until Donald Trump and his team started openly publicizing what they want. They've started openly publicizing their plans if they retake power. And those plans are explicitly fascist. So it wasn't hyperbole in mid-2023, but it certainly isn't now, where the people involved are openly admitting to their plans to create concentration camps. So the world going into 2024 is pretty grim. I would say, I know this, again, seems very, very naive, and believe it or not, you don't have to believe me if you don't want to, but this is the product of a lot of soul-searching on my part, and quite a few emails and Voxer calls to spiritual advisors. So I know that it sounds naive, but I mean it anyway, that there's never been a greater need for BookTube, for a bunch of weird, totally different people coming together to chat about books. There's something very healing in that. There's something, I need it anyway, there's something that I think is very compensatory there. I myself don't believe that even the open appearance of good will triumph. That never happens. This pattern only ever happens in one way. So I think I know how the end of 2024 and all of 2025 is going to be, and I don't think any of us are going to be making videos at this time next year. Or if we are, we're going to be wrapping things up. Unless you fancy talking about the art of the deal all the time, and only that. But in between, I could be wrong about that. History has never taken another path, but then again, there's never been a country like this one before. So if any country's going to break that pattern, it might be America. Whether or not those predictions turn out to be true, if we turn from events of the world to events of Steve, I have cause to smile, because BookTube is still here. We're all still here. And we can talk and laugh and joke with each other. We can do all sorts of dorky events. We make all sorts of dorky videos. And I look forward to that. I didn't for a long time. I was gone for a long time, but I very much miss BookTube at its best, and would like to help. I would like to get right back into the swing of making videos if you'll have me on your big plasma screen TVs. I know your dogs are all voting yes, but if you're willing, I'd like to do that. And I'll just start off with 3 things from my own world, 3 things from the bookish world, rather than the dire outside world. Now, typically on videos like this, the first thing to start with is my reading goals for 2024. But that doesn't really help when it comes to me, because those always take the form of numbers, and my numbers are not believable. And when I say that, I'm largely pitching that word to the vast, nebulous majority of people who never comment, never email me, never vox me, have never come over here for wine and calzones and had free to scream at them. They have never risen above the surface at all. The vast majority of that. I think my channel has 15,000 subscribers. There is nothing like 15,000 people participation on this channel. Nothing like it. I'm not decrying that. I would love it. The more me to go around. but there's nothing like that. So when I say that my numbers aren't believable, I'm largely pitching that to strangers who just happen in on this channel. I would like to believe that after all this time, some of you have been watching me for years. Some of you have been watching me from the beginning. I'd like to believe that after all this time, those of you who have been watching lots of videos on this channel would not find my numbers unbelievable. I can back it up. I can talk about everything that I've read. Nevertheless, the numbers are unbelievable, and the numbers projected. 2023 was my best reading year of my life in terms of numbers, in terms of number of books read, and I want to exceed that in 2024. I think the future after 2024 is legitimately a blank abyss. I mean, that is true for me anyway on a personal side, because I stop at the end of every year and start up again. But in this case, a lot is pivoting at the end of 2024. But before that, for the year 2024, I do have a numerical goal for how many books I want to read. And there's no reason for me to give the number because, again, it's just science fiction-y. It's not, I believe, unbelievable because, as I often say, if you built up your reading muscles and literally did nothing else, you would post numbers that are similar. I am sure that you would. If you cut out sub-vocalizing, cut out distractions, and cut out personal hygiene, friends, pants, then you would achieve these numbers too. I won't bother with a number. All I'll say is England, Edward, invades Scotland. Those who have ears to hear. Anyway, that's number one, is Edward invades Scotland for 2024. Then two other things that I want to do for 2024. They are nebulous, but they are nebulous every year. It bothers me. I know that I repeat these things every year, and I know that's wrong. Nevertheless, the two things are AuthorTube and Goodreads. AuthorTube, of course, being a very sketchy, not morally, but a very ill-defined group. It's not at all like BookTube. That I've been able to see, it's not at all like BookTube. But it is a rough conglomeration of channels talking about writing. I found very, very few of them that talk about writing the way we all talk about reading. Maybe that's a mistake. Maybe I shouldn't be looking for an explicit BookTube equivalent. I don't know. The few channels I have seen that talk about writing as a thing that you can sit down and do, and that has methods, and the loathsome phrases, best practices, and that have incidental thoughts, maybe not tag videos, but certainly fodder for content. That type of AuthorTube, I have almost not encountered any of it. If you know about it, let me know, but I've encountered almost nothing like that. Instead, the whole of the space seems to be split between COD inspirational videos and upselling. People who self-published a book, maybe self-published 2 books, mini-published a book, maybe mainstream published a book, and now all they want to do is sell you things. I've got a webinar series, I've got tutorials, I've got face-to-face one-on-one meetings, etc., etc. I don't know exactly what I want to do with AuthorTube, but I think maybe if I keep it limited, it should certainly at least take the form of a few videos, regular videos about writing. I don't see anything wrong with that. That's certainly not beyond the pale. I don't think it requires an extra channel. But if you do, let me know. I'm thinking I could just label a video AuthorTube so that those of you who I have not yet browbeaten into writing, know to avoid them. And then there's Goodreads, of course, which I say every year. This is why I talk about this every year. Goodreads is where the readers go. Other apps have tried to chip away at that. Other apps have Storygraph, for instance, has lots of fans. But Goodreads is where the readers go, just by default. It's become an absolute staple of the reading lives of so many people that I know, who use it in all kinds of different ways. Some people put little reviews on Goodreads of everything that they read. Other people just use it for stats. They check in and use it for stats. Other people, lots and lots of people that I know, use it for guidance. Not so much putting their own stats on, but checking the stats of other people, looking up books on Goodreads. And there are communities and discussion boards, and every year I say, I really need to become more involved in that. It makes no sense that I'm not. I am all about that. I'm all about everything that Goodreads is. Maybe not star ratings, but everything else. The endless discussions on Goodreads, I'm all about that. So here at the beginning of 2024, I am thinking about all sorts of ways to improve that. Right now, it's so minimal that anything would be an improvement. any amount of involvement would be more involvement than I have right now. The very basic amount of involvement with Goodreads that I can think of would be to log more of my own reading activity. At the very least, post links to anything I review. At the very least, do that. But maybe a lot more than that. Maybe there are things that I read in the course of a year. I think certainly there are things that I read in the course of a year that wouldn't really warrant 500 to 800 words in any venue. They wouldn't really warrant that, but there are still things to say, 100 words. Positives and negatives, one thing that stands out. For a lot of indie authors, that's everything. That might seem so minimal to me that it's not worth doing, but to them, to indie authors who are desperate for any amount of attention to their books, any kind of critical notice, that's a lot. And there are lots of other books too that aren't maybe so low profile that would still appreciate it. Maybe readers out there would appreciate it. There's got to be a way, both for Goodreads and also something that I never mention on this channel, which is all the reading threads on Reddit. Lots of people go there as well. I think I prefer these things, at least, are text-based. I think I prefer them to anything related to TikTok. I don't have any plans of embracing book talk. There are certain segments of Goodreads that are renowned for levels of toxicity so great you can see them from the space station. And everything that I've heard tells me that book talk is even worse. So no, thank you. No, thank you. In fact, the toxicity levels on Goodreads give me pause. What if I stumble into one of those rat nests by mistake? I don't know what would happen. I'd like to think that Goodreads has taken some of that in hand and maybe worked to fix some of it. The measures to fix it are easy. The fact that Goodreads hasn't adopted all of them 10 years ago amazes me. But maybe they're understaffed. It's just to put it very, very, very mildly, just as a mild step. If someone is leaving a review of a book and the first thing they say is that they haven't read it, delete it. Don't ask them to delete it. Goodreads delete it. Surely that is breaking terms of service somehow. I don't know. Obviously, there's a lot about Goodreads that I don't know. I need to learn more about it and then get involved. Somehow, I need to raise my profile on Goodreads. I want to explore more about what people are saying on it and what people are reading on it, what they're liking on it, all that sort of stuff. So there you go. There's reading goals for 2024. Longshanks invades Scotland. There's AuthorTube, whatever that's going to be. I'm not satisfied any longer with leaving writing-related videos only to NaNoWriMo-related times of the year. I want to do more of them. And Goodreads. Feel free to flood me with advice about Goodreads. Not, I should qualify right away when I say feel free to flood me with advice, your thoughts, your opinions about Goodreads. I am not saying I don't know anything about Goodreads, okay? So, I'm again, speaking to that nebulous crowd that never raises its head above the parapet, I would appreciate it if we didn't have a reprise of what happened last year when I mentioned that I needed to do a reconsideration of the poetry of William Wordsworth. and got a lot of emails from people taking a deep sigh and saying, Wordsworth, little Stevie, you're in for a world of wonder. Where to begin with Wordsworth? Let me give you some pointers. when I had to come up with many, many polite ways to write back and say, I know a whole lot more about Wordsworth than you do. I was only saying I intend to revisit him. I wasn't saying that I don't know anything. I stumbled accidentally on a subject that brought out the brotivational bloviator in a whole bunch of people. I don't want a reprise of that with Goodreads. When I say flood me with opinions about the site, I'm saying give me your experiences with it. Tell me what you'd like to see me do with it. Don't assume that I don't know anything about it. But anyway, there you go. That is a kind of State of the Union for 2024 as we recommence videos on this channel. I don't know how much of this was of any interest. Of course, the only interesting thing you want is right next to me. The screen is right here. He's right next to me. Didn't want to be up on her seat on the couch because it's a little bit chilly. So Janet, she's not a puppy anymore. There are jumps that she thinks twice about now. She still does them, and she still easily can do them. And her grip on the neighborhood is ironclad. But chills? No. No, she doesn't do them anymore. Doesn't just shrug them off anymore. She's going to be 7. Seems unbelievable. But anyway, that is the state of 2024 at the beginning of the year, a week in. So I'll wrap this up for now. It's nice to be talking to all of you again. Feel free in the comment section or in emails or in Voxer, the small fraction of you that actually are here and that actually are reciprocally involved, feel free to let me know your own prognostications about 2024. Are you expecting much for the year? Maybe a new job, maybe a new child, new home? I'd love to hear about it all, of course. I am still very nosy. So I'll wrap this up for now, and I'll see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.